Hey, and welcome back to my channel where we're going over every single spoiler for the upcoming Raging Echoes League. Today is day 9 and we got a big update today, so let's get right into it. So Jagex today revealed the Combat Mastery system, so I'm going to do a quick overview of that. I'm also going to talk about some Discord clarifications that we get as always before we get into the details. Then I'm going to talk about how we're going to collect the Combat Mastery points. Then we're going to talk about the passive benefits that we get at every tier. And then I want to go into detail into melee, range, and magic. Lastly, I'll give you my analysis of each of the tiers and the different choices. And then I'll kind of give you what I'm going to pick and maybe what you want to pick as well. So the Combat Masteries. Now this picture is huge and massive. We're going to get into each kind of component in a second in detail. But overall, as you can see, it's a 3-part tree structure. And so there's 6 tiers. And so every point you get, well, you'll be able to chain, get the next level tier unlock. Remember, they are in a sequential order, so you can't just pick random points. You have to go in order. And as you can see, some of them kind of get buffed over time. In addition to that, we're going to get a total of 10 points. You can see the Combat Mastery points list here. And I'll go into that in detail as well. But so we have 6 tiers and 10 points. What that means is you're going to be able to max one tier and also put 4 points into another tier, which is pretty cool. There's also talk of maybe going 5 and 5 and getting 2 skills, 2 different combat styles, and that would be really cool. Some people are maybe even considering going 4, 4, and 2. I'm not really sure where I would see that. So pretty much we can't really go a full tribrid style, but we can kind of get like a max in one style and a pretty good powerful secondary style overall. So let's get into some of the more details, but before we do, I want to talk about some Discord clarifications. So Combat Masteries are available immediately from league start, so as soon as you can do the first task, you're going to be able to get that point. To get to each passive tier, each tier of that tier, you must unlock that tier. And what this pretty much means is if you put in a point into range and a point into magic, you're not going to get the tier 2 passive, you're only going to get the tier 1 passive. So this does kind of reward, going to tier 6 as fast as possible, and then going later on into your second combat style. In addition to that, masteries are permanent choices, so we don't get a chance to reroll these. Passive effects of all styles with a 95% chance apply to all combat styles, so you can choose the melee relic, which I think is a phenomenal buff. I absolutely love that. Passives do not stack unless you unlock multiple of the same tier. So that means if you get a magic and a range selection, you're not going to get 95 times 2% save for all of those resources. It's just a one-time passive unlock permanently. The 50% attack speed for 5-tick weapons is rounded down, and so their 5-tick weapons will become 2 ticks. Super phenomenal. We saw this last league. It's going to be a really, really powerful, kind of top-end weapon choice of the league. The combat tasks can be done in any order to do the masteries, so you don't have to kill a giant first. You can go and kill Jad first. I'm not exactly sure why you would do that, but maybe you're just holding off on maybe an easy point later on. Right? Prayer penetration applies to monsters that have overhead prayers. This is the clarification we'll get into a little bit more detail once we talk about that specific passive tier. And then the Hesperia item, that item we talked about before, which has 3 different combat styles. Depending on whatever attack style you have enabled, it's going to benefit from that. So if you're using it to attack with melee, but you went in the range masteries, you're not going to benefit from that. And so just keep that in mind. I think it's still overall really powerful of a weapon choice. It's a really great early to mid game weapon. So I still would recommend it, but just keep that in mind. It's not going to get triple benefits from all 3 tiers. In addition to that, for the melee, there is this special effect called an echo, and that will hit for every single echo splat that happens. And so things like the DDS and the scythe, they're going to be able to echo off each of those hits. Now, I'll talk about that in a second, but I just want to get these clarifications up front. In addition to that, does the echo hit double splat? No. Does the echo hit roll for a double blue moon effect? No. And the echo hits do stack for the sunlight spear special. Really, really powerful if you are going to go for Voldemort. For range, the masteries do not apply to the cannon, so your cannon can still miss based off the accuracy mastery that we talked about, or that we're going to talk about. And magic, the T6 mastery calculates the player's max hit first and then adds the 10% on top of it. Or no, actually that's just for the HP. So it calculates the max hit first and then calculates the enemy's HP, and if it's different, it'll call the monster. All right, so point collection. So there's 10 tasks on here and there's 10 points. How you distribute them, it's up to you. I'm thinking probably going 6-4. Some people are thinking 5-5. Someone mentioned like a 4-4 and 2. Really not seeing the use case of that. Now the tasks here are defeating a giant, defeat 10 monsters with a combat level of 100 plus. This can be as easy as like a safe spotted blue dragon, for example. Also, Scurrius has been added in the game since last league, and they've kind of made it as like the entry level stable boss. So they want you to kill Scurrius once by yourself. In addition to that, they also want you to train your Slayer level once you kill your first monster that requires 55 plus. This is Turots, but everyone's going to have access to the mushrooms, and then I think also later on you'll have access to a lot more monsters, and so it should be pretty quick to get there. Next up, we have Jad in the fight caves. Now, if you're a beginner, you've never fought Jad, I don't want this to scare you. Jad in leagues is kind of a cakewalk, especially if you're going range or magic. If you are going melee, it can be a little bit challenging. But remember, we have like really powerful relics. You should be able to get to max stats or very high stats early on. And so Jad should become overall trivial. I am not a fan of this option here, and I'll talk about that later on in my analysis. Also reaching a combat level of 100 and then defeating an Echo boss. This whole league is centered around Echo bosses and killing them. And so each Echo boss you kill, because you're going to unlock 3 regions, so Echo boss 1, 2, and 3 will each give you a combat mastery point. And lastly, Jagex wants you to go for the Inferno and kill Zuck. Those are your 10 points. Once you get them, you can get all of your mastery points. That said, if you don't get them, don't worry. You're still going to be able to max out 6 points fairly easily for beginners. That doesn't include the Jad part or an Echo boss. So I think that becomes your choice of like which one is easier for you. Just keep that in mind as to how we're going to unlock all of these mastery points. So every tier that you unlock has a passive effect. Like I mentioned earlier, you're going to need to unlock all the way up to tier 6 to get all the passive effects. So if you put in 2 points, 1 into range and 1 into magic early on, you will not get that tier 2 effect. So the tier 1 effect is 95% chance to save weapon charges, ammunition, and runes used for all spells. Now this doesn't really affect melee that much, maybe a tentacle if you're going Kandarin, but other than that, the scythe is probably the big one where melee gets benefits. But remember, this affects all of your combat types. And so even though I might be going melee, I'm going to be able to save tons of runes and arrows and bolts from this. I think this is absolutely phenomenal. I'm probably going to rush and kill a giant just so I can unlock this and make my range and magic training a lot cheaper and overall efficient. I'm so glad Jagex added this as like a passive tier 1. It is a huge staple, and it's always been a miss in my opinion overall when only the magic users get to save their runes and other people don't. It's just kind of a quality of life that should be really nice for everyone. All right, passive tier 2, healing from all sources is increased by 20%. This includes your food, Guthans, Ceradomin brews, blood spells, blood fury, things like that. Every sort of healing source gets increased by 20%. This is phenomenal. There's going to be a lot of good use case for this, but at the early part of the game when you're probably, killing Scurrius to unlock this or maybe killing like a Slayer monster, that pretty much is when you're going to be mostly using a lot of food and not have access to all of the gear and the spells that give you the blood, the healing, and so you're probably maximizing just the food, which overall, super phenomenal. Banker's Note is known to give you infinite food, and here if all of your food gives you 20% bonus, that's phenomenal. Overall, really, really good passive tier 2 effect. Passive tier 3, accuracy with all styles is increased by 100%. Now, remember, this is increased by 100%, so whatever accuracy you have in your combat stats view is going to be increased by 100%. So let's say you're wearing like, rune plate body and you're attacking with magic. Rune plate body, I think, gives you like minus like 30 magic. So that's going to reduce your accuracy and thus reduce the effect of this 100% bonus. So just keep that in mind. This is only going to be 100% more. It is overall valuable, so when you're in like max magic gear, you're going to have incredible accuracy, but it's pretty much a more multiplier, not a flat base kind of number. All right, passive tier 4, damage taken is reduced by 15%. Pretty straightforward. This means Jad is going to hit you lower max hit by 15%. Just do the math on whatever the max hit is. The wiki, it has the max hit usually of most monsters. So if you go there, you should be able to see the max hit of that monster. And then you can just, multiply it by 0.85 and you'll get your new max hit. And so you can figure out, hey, can I tank a hit or not from your current HP pool? Really good effect. Overall, this means that, with your food healing 20% more and you taking 15% more damage, that should trivialize a lot more content. And as I was saying, people who've never killed Jad before, this should really be helpful overall to kind of help you take on that challenge. As I've always mentioned that, the relics and the combat masteries and leagues are kind of like training wheels to really get you into that top tier endgame content. And I know Jad isn't endgame content, but that is still a huge hurdle for a lot of us breaking into there. All right, tier 5, prayer point gain is increased by 25% for all sources. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, this is going to be my prayer potions. This is going to be my super restores. Yes, absolutely, that's going to increase. One thing we don't know yet is we don't know what the combat masteries are, and we may get a mastery that, auto regenerates prayer as well. If you're thinking about auto praying, the Bone Crusher and, automatically getting some prayer back, 25% isn't enough for it to round up to a whole nother prayer point. So just keep that in mind. Neither is the Holy Wrench. But what is a really good effect if you're going at Asgarnia is the Saradomin God Sword, and also, therefore, the Dog Sword will restore some prayer. So that, I think, is going to be really, really powerful. And hey, I might be going for the Dog Sword myself. All right. Passive tier number 6. Attacks with all styles now have a 60% prayer penetration. So what this means is pretty much whatever your damage is, you're going to deal 60% of whatever that hit was against a monster. Now, I know what you're thinking. What monsters use overhead prayers? Sure, there is, bosses in Tombs of Amasket, but also we all have access to Tormented Demons. So let's say you're going to max out the melee stat and the combat style, and you want to just kind of melee everything. Well, Tormented Demons will switch their prayers over time, but if you don't want to switch your items and your gears because your melees are your best in slot, you can just keep attacking them through that, and you're going to pretty much do 60% damage, which with the power of the maxed out combat masteries, you're still going to be doing absurd amounts of damage, but keep that in mind that it will be 60% of what you could have done. That said, it might still be more powerful than your magic and your range alternatives. So Tormented Demons are a great place where this will be used, Tombs of Amasket, things like that. All right, let's get into melee. So melee hits have a 25% chance to roll twice and take the highest result. I think Double Shine said this was about an 8% increase. So I'm going to quote him on that. He's really phenomenal with doing some of this math ahead of time. In addition to that, so overall, that's going to just be a flat melee damage bonus, which is really nice. All right, tier 2, melee hits have a 10% chance to generate an echo hit. An echo hit is an additional melee hit that gives you 50% of your max hit and respects accuracy, right? And this is for PVM only, but pretty much every time you hit, you have a 10% chance to do a secondary hit that's 50% less. Now, if you're familiar with Burning Claws hits 3 times. You get one of your top hits, and then your other 2 hits are kind of split in half. So this is going to be very similar to that, where when that 10% chance happens, it's going to be on hit. Now, if you remember the clarification, every hit splat has a chance to generate this echo hit. So your DDS specs, your Burning Claws, your sights, anything that hits multiple times, your hammers, all of these are going to have that double effect, which is really, really powerful. So just keep that in mind, especially when we get to tier 6. Now, melee attack reset, attack rate is cooled down to 80%. What this pretty much means is your 5 ticks go to 4 ticks, your 3 ticks go to 2 ticks, your 4 ticks go to 3 ticks. Everything pretty much is going down by 1. I believe, your 6 tick items should go to a 4 tick, and so should your 7 ticks should also potentially go to a 4 tick. So just keep that in mind. I think we're really going to get through the tier 3 to tier 6 really quick. And so you shouldn't be worried too much here. Pretty much at this point, your attacks will be a little bit faster. And then when you get to tier 5, they're going to be even faster. So at tier 4, your melee hits have a chance to heal 40% damage dealt. Now, this is interesting because if you're going to go for a Dorax, you're going to try to, have your hit points low. And so getting this heal effect is kind of a downside because you don't want to heal for those massive hits. But that's, I think, one niche edge case. Another case is you do want to do a lot of damage and then heal up as much as possible. Right? So this 5% chance is a little bit more inconsistent than like the range effect that I'll talk about next. But overall, super good. It just kind of adds that automatic built-in HP sustain when you're fighting monster. Now, don't forget the passive effect that also boosts the healing by 20%. That does affect here. So overall, this is just going to allow you to use less resources and just keep fighting monsters, which is really nice. Now, Tier 5, this is just a souped-up version of Tier 3, where your attack rate is at 50%. Like I said, it's going to be pretty quick to go from Tier 3 to Tier 5. And now all of those 5-tick weapons like Scythe, they're going to become a lot more faster. So at Tier 6, this is where I think your double hit weapons become really, really powerful, right? So now your echo chance goes up to 20%. So for every hit splat to echo, and each of your echoes can echo again up to 8 times in a row. Now the chance for that for 20% times 20%, 8 times, so 0.2 to the 8th power is really, really, really small. But that said, every hit splat that you hit has a chance. So even if you get 1 or 2 echo effects, I think that's going to be really powerful. I think getting the Burning Claws from Tormented Demons is going to be a phenomenal item to go after. In addition to that, the Dragon Dagger spec is really, really nice. Also, your hammers that hit twice is going to be good. I think there's a lot of good use cases. And lastly, the picture even shows the Scythe. The Scythe that's going to hit, I think, 3 or 4 times. That's going to all of those hit splats are going to have a chance to echo. So overall, I think melee looks super, super powerful. I think we have a lot of dual hit weapons that are really going to maximize this echo effect. And I'm really liking melee. All right, let's get to range. So range, I think the difference between melee and range overall, the theme is, melee is all about like getting multiple hits in. I think range is all about consistency. So Tier 1, damage rolls beneath 30% of your max hit are increased by 30%. So when I say consistency, you're going to overall do more damage. So everything that's a low hit kind of gets increased by 30%. Remember, I think the one issue I have with this one is your lower hits, let's say you hit a 1, even if you increase a 1 by 30%, it's still going to round down and it's still going to be a 1. And so that's the part that I'm kind of like disappointed with. But again, this is a Tier 1 relic. And so, you're going to get past this Tier 1 mastery pretty quick. So moving on to Tier 2. Each subsequent ranged attack has a max hit additional increase by 5%, and it resets after 20%. So pretty much you're fighting a monster, you're going to do 5% more damage each hit up to 20%. So let's say you kill a monster in 5 hits. That last hit that you do, or the 4th hit that you do is going to be 20%, right? Overall, it's just more progressive. And like I said, it's all about that consistency where your low rolls get boosted, and then your after you hit a monster multiple times, you're going to do more and more damage. This is really good for items like the blowpipe overall, where you want to be doing a lot of hits really, really quick. And so, every 4th hit is going to hit that 20% threshold, and it's going to overall be a lot more powerful. All right, Tier 3, range attack rates reset or set at 80%. So this is pretty much the same thing as before, where your 4 ticks go down to 3 ticks, your 3 ticks go down to 2 ticks, your 2 ticks go down to 1 tick, and so on. Again, we're going to get past the Tier 3 pretty quick and get to the Tier 5, I don't think, within a couple of days probably maximum. And so this is going to be good to kind of progress you and get your range attacks a little bit faster. But I think we're really going to talk about the benefits at Tier 5. So at Tier 4, so remember I talked about consistency. So at Tier 4, every 5th range attack heals 5 hit points. Now, in comparison to that melee, where the melee had a 5% chance to heal, this one is a consistent 5 hit points heal. Now remember, the blowpipe is going to be super fast. The darts, knives, all of these items are going to be super fast. And no matter what your hit is, you're always going to heal 5 hit points. I think this is super powerful for fast attacking items like the Dorgashan crossbow, blowpipe, things like that early on, where you're going to be able to sustain your health really, really well with this. So overall, super powerful. I think Tier 4 for range is overall probably the best consistency-wise. Both melee and magic have like a chance and percentage calculations, and so I think range does better. And range is about that speed of attack, and so that's going to do really, really well for you. All right, so Tier 5, as I mentioned, is just a souped-up version of Tier 3, where all of your 5 ticks pretty much become 2-tick weapons. This is going to be your Zerai crossbow, your T-bows, things like that. Overall, all of your 5 ticks are going to become 2 ticks. Longbows are going to do well as well if you want to use a longbow. I believe the Tormented Demon's bow is a longbow, and so that will attack really, really fast. So make sure you're chasing after those Tormented Demon drops. I think they're just going to be really, really good, and I'm glad Jagex has them in the core game for everyone to have. All right, lastly, we have this Tier 6 relic that I think is either going to be really powerful for your region or completely useless for your region. and the never miss with range. So in any area where you're already planning to use range to attack a monster, you already have that 100% passive boost. In addition to that, you have things like the new blowpipe that rolls twice and takes the higher chance accuracy roll as well. And also the top end of range gear has overall pretty good accuracy as well. And so in places where you're already using range today, I don't think this one is that too powerful. Where this is powerful is against monsters that you can't use range against, right? Like Soul, for example. If you want to fight Soul with range, I think you're going to be able to do this because every single hit is going to hit. Every single attack is going to hit. And I think that's just going to be super duper powerful. And what this relic and this tier benefit really does is it pretty much allows you to use range everywhere. And I think that's the biggest benefit here. And so just keep that in mind. It's like, if I'm going to max out range, I want to be able to kind of use it everywhere. And that's what you're going to get from this mastery. So overall, I think range is pretty good. I think I just see a lot more fun in melee. Like I said, melee is about all these echoes and these extra hits. Range is a lot more about consistency. I picked range last league as well overall, and I think I had a lot of fun there. So if you're looking for like a nice consistent damage throughput, I think you can't go wrong with range. All right, moving on to magic. So magic here is when you roll above 90% on your max hit, your magic is increased by 20%. Overall, I think this comes out to, I forgot what the damage is. It's going to be like another like 10%-ish increase. Overall, super good. Like I said, the tier 1 relics are pretty low in power level, but overall it is a net damage boost, which is nice. Moving on to tier 2, your magic max hit is increased by 5% per tick. This is interesting. So what I think how this really benefits is when you're attacking between monsters. So you kill a monster and then you like run over to the next monster. Every tick in between, I'm guessing that's what's going to stack up to that 40% to get your maximum benefit. The tier 3 and tier 5 relic that actually speeds up your weapon is actually going to kind of reduce the benefit of the tier 2 relic. So this is where I see like some conflicting power, but I really think that the tier 2 relic here is about that first initial hit. If you remember last league where we had like that Berserker relic, which is about your first hit is always your max hit for your mage setup. I think this is going to try to like be something like that, where your first hit is always really good and your first hit always gets that 40% boost. But then each subsequent attack is a little bit weaker. And I think that's really what this tier 2 relic is trying to do. Now the tier 3 relic, same thing as melee and range. It's just reducing your attack rate. So your 4 ticks, you're going to be 3 ticks and so on. I think this is actually pretty important for magic because you have a lot of 5 tick staffs that become a little bit quicker in auto casting. If you do get a trident, whether you're going Kandarin or Turnwind, you will make that a 4 tick to a 3 tick. Again, super early on, the tier 5 relic will overwrite this pretty quickly. At tier 4, you're going to, whenever you roll a top hit, so magic's all really about that top hit being really, really big, right? And so whenever you do a big hit, there's a 10% chance, or you will heal for 10% of that damage. One thing to point out here is whenever you do, blood spells and you hit like a 1 or a 2 or a 5, you're really not healing too much. And so the healing there is kind of wasted. And I think Jagex kind of realized that like the healing is really only beneficial at the top end of your big hits, right? And so whenever you're doing those 90% plus big hits, you're going to get 10% extra heal. Remember, we have a passive effect that boosts your heal, so this is going to be great. All of your magic hits are boosted. So whenever you do that, you're going to have a huge boost there. Overall, really, really nice effect. All right, moving on to tier 5. Like I said, all of your 5-tick weapons become 4-tick, become 2-tick weapons, and overall that's going to be really, really good. And so you're just going to have really, really fast blasting magic with your shadow, pretty much. All right, last up we have tier 6. The max hit with magic is increased by 1% for each 100 hit points. What this pretty much means is for any monsters that you're fighting in raids or big bosses with lots of HP like Vorkath, all of your hits are going to pretty much start out doing 10% more, and they're going to become a little bit less damage over time as the monster drops. So I think this is pretty good. I think 10%, don't sleep on this. 10% of all, and this is additive to all the other damage buffs that you're getting. So it's going to be really, really big overall. And in addition to that, on a successful magic hit, if your target has less hit points than your max hit, you max hit. Now this is where it gets juicy, because this max hit, pretty much when you're going from monster to monster, right? And there's like a few ticks of running in between them, you're going to get that 40% boost from tier 2. In addition to that, if you're going to hit your max hit, you're going to proc the tier 4 relic where you're going to guarantee heal yourself 10% of the damage dealt. right? So tier 6, tier 4, and tier 2 all kind of combine really well when attacking multiple monsters. I see this great use in Tombs of a Masket when you have to kill all of the little dogs of the various types. You can pretty much guarantee heal and take some hits from poison or from explosions or whatever. And it's overall going to be really, really fast and really good. Also, Slayer is going to be boosted where you're constantly healing. Maybe you don't even need prayer. Who knows? I don't know. Overall, I think there's a really good synergy here between tier 6, tier 2, and tier 4 for Magic. It's looking really powerful overall. All right, so here's my analysis. The one thing I don't like about this is the people who could really benefit, the beginners and intermediates. I think I'm more of an intermediate player now. Is probably maybe closer to a beginner player last league. The ones who could really benefit from like the training wheels of these combat masteries, we're probably going to miss out, right? Someone who's never done Jad before, maybe they get to do Jad. Maybe someone who's, struggle with bosses, maybe they'll kill one Echo boss, maybe two. But maybe the fight for Zuck becomes a lot harder, right? In addition to this, for anyone who's considering going Varlamore, pretty much you have to guarantee to fight Saul and beat Saul. And he's supposed to be Grand Master, the highest difficulty of all Echo bosses, and probably the most difficult in the game. And so this just kind of removes your chance of getting that last 10th point. Now, that said, you are going to be able to get 6 points and max out your combat style. So I think overall the power and effect that people are going to see is still the same as last league, if not more, because you're still going to be able to hopefully get 1 or 2 extra points overall. But I do think that this is kind of a bit of a dislike. I also think that this kind of forces players like me to definitely take Banker's Note, because I definitely want to try Colosseum and Zuck, and I was going Banker's Note anyways, but if there was a chance I could have sustained and just used Total Recall to farm bosses, I was probably considering it. Now I'm pretty much guaranteed not going Varlamore, because I don't necessarily think I can guaranteed beat Saul. In addition to that, I definitely want to go Banker's Note for the infinite food and sustain overall. The 95% saved is super powerful. I love that. I think that's the best change for Combat Masteries overall. Huge quality of life for everyone. We're not limited by prayer capes from range capes or things like that. Like I said earlier, should we get a prayer restoration combat relic? There's a good chance, and I think it'll synergize well with this passive effect that we have. So don't sleep on that. I think that's going to be really good. And lastly, the 10 points really means we can't max dual styles. I know coming up to leagues, people were thinking, hey, are the combat masteries going to allow for tri-bridding and multiple combat styles? And are we not going to go deep into one? No, turns out we are going to go deep into one style. I think you can do 5 and 5 and go dual styles. So you can have like a 2-tick T-bow and a 2-tick scythe. I'm not sure why you would necessarily do that and just not go deep into them, because the tier 6 relics are really powerful damage-wise. So, I think what's really going to happen is we're still going to be locked for our choices based off of what regions we go. So if you're going to go desert and you're going to want that 1-tick blowpipe, range makes a lot of good sense. In addition to that, you have Masori gear, so that just adds to your range things. And you'll be able to get the T-bow from Tombs of a Masket, so that's really good. For Mauritania, you have things like the 2-tick Guthan's heals. Remember all those healing effects and the gloves from the gargoyles. You're going to be able to stack the effects, and it's going to be super powerful. All tier 5, all 5-tick weapons are now 2-ticks. So all those top-end weapons are going to be really, really powerful. You're going to want to go after as many as you can get your hands on. In addition to that, all of your spells are going to be from 5 ticks to 2 ticks. So we have this new addition of Elemental Mastery. And so all of those spells that you would fight certain bosses with, those are, instead of 5-tick autocasts, are going to be 2-tick autocasts. And lastly, of course, crossbows for range. We saw this in the past. 2-tick crossbow is going to be super powerful. You're going to be proccing those ruby bolts left and right. So in my opinion, what I'm thinking is melee magic range is what I think the power is. I think range has the best consistency. I think magic has some really, really powerful synergies. But I'm just really eyeing the melee. I think the Echo with, the double hit splat weapons is going to be really, really powerful and really, really fun. I'm likely picking Mauritania and Asgarnia. I really want to play with the dog sword. I think the melee gear coming out of Mauritania is going to be phenomenal. And so I think maybe my choices are kind of biased to melee here. So hey, what are you going to pick? Let me know. I know this video has been going really long. There's just so much to dive into here. We didn't even compare how these combat masteries, compare against last league and all the changes. But thank you so much for staying with me to the end. If you found this helpful, definitely smash the like button. If you want my next analysis videos for tomorrow and the upcoming days until leagues, definitely hit the subscribe button to get notified. And let me know what masteries you're going to be picking and any other synergies and strategies that I may have missed in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.